I'd now like to introduce Stephen Apfelbaum, who's joining us from the US by Zoom. Steve's a very experienced guy at helping farmers improve soils and ecology of their farmland. Steve's one of the leading restoration ecologists in the US. In his 40-year career, he's been involved in more than 9,000 projects throughout North America. He's authored many books and hundreds of articles in peer-reviewed science papers. Through his business, Applied Ecological Institute, Steve's developed methodologies for improving land management and farm ecosystems that include measurement methods that allow farmers to quantify soil carbon and biodiversity improvements. Through Applied Ecological Institute, Steve helps farmers monetize the improvements in soil carbon and biodiversity that are recorded in the projects he runs. Steve, are you there? Here.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Phil. Well, thank you very much. And I had an opportunity to listen to the last speaker, and I believe what I'll be saying will springboard off of what you've heard. What I wanted to first say is for about 15 to 20 years here in the US and Canada and South and Central America, we've been trying to understand the role of nature-based solutions in a whole range of the challenges we face, from failing nutritional density of food, increased flooding and damages from flooding, and the more recent issue that we've been challenged by is climate, but there's far more reaching and serious challenges that brings on that you're all aware of and you've already talked about. So we starting in about 2008 wrote what became globally accepted, maybe not in New Zealand and Australia, through VERA, as it was called VCS, Verified Carbon Standard, and now VERA. We wrote a method to measure and value soil carbon, greenhouse gas emissions, water, and we're now adding biodiversity to the mix. And then we applied that method in projects throughout the Americas. And what I wanted to do is just dance lightly across the tip of the icebergs and give you some sense of some of what we've learned. And I'll mention that the partners were Shell Oil Company, their R&D unit. They were trying to pump excessive CO2 into the ground to increase their oil production, presumably and allegedly also to reduce the emissions to the atmosphere. And we said, well, why don't you invest in restoring soil on the planet, and soil organic and inorganic carbon, and that every dollar invested in that pays dividends and all sorts of co-benefits, and you've heard about a number of those here in the past few minutes from the other speakers. So let me try to advance the slides here if I can. It's not, so I'm gonna focus on soil carbon today, but every project that we've worked on, the ones I'll be reporting on, did mass balance, greenhouse gas, flux tower analysis, did very comprehensive soil, water, landscape water measurements, a full range of biodiversity from soil genomics to breeding birds and a range of other species and groups of organisms. I'll focus on soil carbon though, and give you citations and locations where you can look on Vimeo at the Soil Carbon Cowboys video series that we're part of, or at Patagonia's movie called Unbroken Ground that we're part of, and also the new movie, three-hour series coming out called Roots So Deep, that really do tease apart the science, very comprehensive science and socioeconomics that we've contributed to. I'll give you two example projects. One is a low disturbance cropping project which is focused on 7 million acres in Washington state. And another is the first phase of an improved grazing project called an adaptive multi-paddock grazing project in the southeastern US. And we've since expanded that to the northern Great Plains across about 500 million acres of the US and an even larger area in Canada. And then the last thing I'll tell you is we've just authored and have had approved a new standard for measurement. It's a standard that has a family of sub protocols, including a soil carbon protocol, a soon to be released biodiversity protocol, and a soon to be released water protocol. And we've also stood up a new registry just for these nature-based regenerative projects that we're working on. And let me see if I can advance. So what we began a conversation with Shell about nearly 15 years ago is we said, we are releasing at that time about 9 gigatons of excessive CO2 and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And about half of that remains in the atmosphere, about 4 gigatons. And the remainder is split between mineralized contributions in the ocean and is part of the life that we and cattle and plants and trees represent, soil microbes represent. And we asked the question, how could we, let me see if I can advance this, when we looked at where carbon was distributed on the planet, these circles are proportional to the scale of where living carbon on the planet is found. And you can see that plants represent the smallest percentage of the living carbon on the planet. A majority is found in the oceans, dissolved and or mineralized. But the second largest quantity on the planet is found in the soil. And we manage a majority as humans of the carbon found in the soil on the planet. We've subsequently learned, in contrast to what we all thought with the hype about and the conversation about tropical rainforest and carbon in trees, we've learned that you can take all the carbon in the trees and the soil on the planet, and there's more in the peats, the muck and histic soils on the planet. What we know is there's about 3.5 billion hectares of pasture on the planet and about 1 billion hectares of croplands. And we asked a simple question. If we raised the carbon by 1% on that 4.5 billion hectares of cropland and pasture, what would that do if we could do that to offset the 4 gigatons of excessive CO2 we're adding to the atmosphere annually? And if we were able to add 1%, it would generate around 4 to 4.5 gigatons of additional soil organic carbon annually. And that created an epiphany within the conversation we were having with Shell R&D and with about 20 other research institutions. And we secured funding to begin looking at the possibility and prove up or true up what was actually happening, in this magical thing called photosynthesis. What actually could it do at little or no cost if we simply managed plants correctly and changed the way we were thinking about managing the earth? The Palouse project, it's a 30 million acre area of wind-blown loess soils. And we worked with an innovative group of farmers. The farmers truly are the innovators in North America, in the United States. Not all the farmers, there's innovator groups, and we've secured those champions as a part of these research projects. So low disturbance cropping is one pass no-till. They literally do all of their agricultural production cropping in one pass. They have no-till equipment that disturbs less than 5% of the soil surface. They've eliminated trash rakes and some of the other equipment that clears sometimes up to 25% of the vegetation on the surface of the ground to create a little groove and plant a little seed. These guys are doing 5% or less disturbance, and they're retaining 80 to 90% of the crop residue on the land, and every year planting right through that. What we did was we created this 20 module standard method that was approved by the former VCS, now Vera. It's VM0021, and this was written and tested by about 35 of the top global soil carbon scientists, brought together to create, and then a number of them actually decided to go into the field with us throughout South and Central America and the US and test the method. And what the method requires is a biophysical stratification of the landscape. And there may be 20 or 30 variables that are mapped. And then depending upon those variables, we randomly allocate sample points across the farms or the ranches that we have access to. And then we sample those with this any number of pieces of comparable equipment, but it's a hydraulic sampling unit called a Giddings unit. And we conduct pre and baseline sampling with that unit down to a meter depth. The samples come out of the unit in a plastic core. We cap those cores, we barcode label the cores, we do a field measurement of the depth that we actually achieved, and then those core samples are shipped off to a lab for the pedological, the depth strata measurement of bulk density, soil, organic, inorganic, and total carbon, and other measurements. And what we've done is we've measured not only the low disturbance cropping farms, but we've measured representative areas of conventionally farmed and conservation farmed and reference natural areas. And we've established a common activity baseline scenario over this 7 million acre area that we sampled. And what it showed is the common activity baseline for all the farms, including those doing conservation tillage, is losing about 2 to 3 tons of CO2e per acre per year. And the low disturbance cropping farmers are mitigating, they're stopping that loss by converting to low disturbance cropping, plus they're gaining a little over 2 tons of CO2e per acre per year. That translates into a transactable carbon trade. And when we add the flux tower, the greenhouse gas emissions, methane, CO2, nitrous oxides, water vapor, and so forth, when we add that to it, the mass balance translates into more of about a 5 ton of CO2e per acre per year change from the baseline scenario. And I can tell you more about markets in a little bit here, but let me continue. This is what we conservatively began packaging for these farmers. And we had, the first year we had 100,000 acres of farmers involved. We have subsequently packaged a tranche of the first 35,000 acres of innovators. And we've got about 200,000 acres of farmers that said they want to participate. We are on the market now selling the tranche of the first 35,000 acres. The next project is a very large project funded by McDonald's and Cargill, the Foundation for Ag Research, the USDA, and many other groups. And this brought together top researchers in the US and Canada that are still looking at grazing as a solution to improving soil carbon and a whole range of the other co-benefits that we heard about. This was President Obama's last science presentation, unfortunately, right before he left office. Otherwise, perhaps something better could have come of it. Our research framework and hypothesis and the way we explained this and the way farmers explained it to other farmers was that carbon-rich soil is healthy, beneficial for the entire ecosystem, including human beings. And you can read the other pieces of this. I won't bore you with it, but you've heard, I think, in the previous presentation, much of the same thing. What we basically did is went to paired ranches, these adaptive multi-paddock ranches, right oftentimes across the fence from conventional continuous grazed ranches. And what you're looking at, the inset photo is a conventionally grazed ranch right across the fence from the amp grazed ranch. And you see fundamental differences in ecosystem performance, higher viability, significantly higher nutritious biomass in the amp grazed. We had infiltration rates. I think I'll explain that right now, but the long and the short of what you can look at on the videos, on the films, is that energy flow, water flow, mineral cycles, community dynamics, and I'm proud to report the farmers have reported even socioeconomics is greatly improved under the amp grazed practice compared to the conventional continuous graze practice. What was really interesting to us is that the soil carbon accrual rates, just based on meter depth changes in carbon stocks, was between about 1.5 to 2.5 tons of CO2, tons of C per hectare per year, with AMP being significantly higher. So that translated into about 5 to well over 8 tons of CO2e per hectare per year. And the projections based on a chrono series we did, there's not enough time to explain what that means, is that this accrual rate would be attainable for 50 to 100 years. So this is a long-term solution by most legal and market standards to address a problem that we've created over quite a long period of time, actually. What was interesting to me as a scientist is that the planted pastures of introduced cool season non-native grasses here in the U.S. saturated very quickly with particulate organic carbon in the upper 30 centimeters, and then did not increase significantly at depth. Native grasses, native warm season C4 grasses here in North America, they saturated to a higher level, equal or higher level in the upper 30 centimeters, but they continuously built mineral-associated organic carbon at depth significantly all the way down to a meter and deeper in some sites. And that was a real epiphany. The other thing we've learned is there's no such thing as saturation for mineral-associated organic carbon. Particulate carbon saturates and it decomposes on an annual basis. Mineral-associated organic carbons continually are increasing, which is a fascinating area. The other thing we've learned is inorganic carbon under grazing systems also increases as a result of the grazing animal use and their ability to pass oxalates, discharge oxalates, which can contribute to calcium oxalates, which is a mineralized form of carbon. Not only are the differences noticeable, this is the one side of the fence on the right and the other side of the fence, continuous graze on the left. After 10 years conversion to this adaptive multi-paddock grazing, hopefully you can see a difference. I just went to the eye doctor today and I can see a difference. Well, those differences were actually the measurable differences in organic carbon, and also a shift toward fungal dominated soil genomics compared to what you see on the left, which is primarily bacteria dominated. The other thing, which was fascinating to me, was 27 centimeter per hour increases in infiltration in a clay loam, a highly compacted clay loam soil, 10 to the -7 to 10 to the -9 centimeter per second compactions, very low infiltration rates. And yet in the amp grazed, just significantly higher infiltration. Even in highly permeable sandy soils, we measured significant improvements in infiltration rates. Here's where the planet has pastures in the upper image and where croplands are in the lower image. What we published based on the research is IPC was basically suggesting to reduce ruminants on the planet. So we took their suggestion and modeled it from the current level of emissions and ruminant levels. And what we found in scenario number 2 with the IPC's reduction recommendations for ruminants is no significant decrease globally in net greenhouse gas emissions. So this is methane, CO2, nitrous oxide. As soon as we start implementing or imposing on the model, at least, a hypothetical 25% conversion to this low disturbance cropping and that grazing, we saw a significant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and correlated improvements in water and other benefits, co-benefits that I'm not here to discuss. You can read this paper. We were convinced and still are that these nature-based solutions really are the key to moving forward at any sort of scale that's meaningful on the planet. The next thing I wanted to, and I'll just breeze through it in 2 minutes, we've written a new standard that brings soil, organic carbon, water, biodiversity, and peat together under one regenerative standard. We brought some of the top global scientists together around all these areas and created that standard. It's the version 1.1 has already been used to trade organic carbon. The carbon has been trading its meter depth organic carbon stock change, and it's been trading at anywhere from $24 to about $60 a ton CO2e. And we're just stepping into peat and just about to release a biodiversity module, version 1, and we'll be trading on that. The Regenerative Registry is a public benefit corp here in the U.S. that's managed separately and is the entity that is certifying the credit that's generated. I can make this available to you. The reason that we decided to do our own standard was because most lack rigor, are not scalable, and they ignore co-benefits, and most are expensive to deploy. And what buyers want are high-quality carbon, clear decision pathways, transparency, scalability, and they want visibility to future trustable projects. And they want to work with trustable partners. Farmers and buyers want easy on-ramps. Farmers need early payments to help pay for costs and to pay for practice changes. The method incentivizes a rapid transition to regenerative and restorative land uses, has 6 different on-ramps that of data quality, but have to be trued up with meter depth sampling using the standard methods that we and others have published under VeraVM 0021. I think the last thing I'll leave you with is this registry is really focused. We've traded about 150,000 tons of credits in the first couple of months from 17 ranches. And we're looking at, I think it's just under 1 million tons of trades this year that will be conducted on innovative ranches and some farmlands. And I think that's it. And I'll leave you with that. And if there's time for questions, I'm all yours.